Come on now. There we go.
All right.
We're on round 2 this week.
Yep.
Round 2 of 15 of 3.
Exactly. It's gonna get into some equation like pi. It just goes on forever, and nobody really knows.
And we're
But
gonna
here
get
we
to the
are.
point. We're gonna get to the point where people start coming in, having not listened to like the first 10 or 11, and have no idea of the joke that we're talking about. That will continue for however long.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, right. No way.
Bullshit. Look at this guy.
Oh man, it's so
Drinking from
funny.
cups. If you haven't seen
Drink.
it, check it out. Drinking from cups.
It was so funny when you had sent me that. When I had sent you, or you sent me that voice message
Yeah. Yeah.
the other day, and I was driving. We're driving down to my parents' place. Got the kids loaded up. Molly's sitting next to me, and I just start busting up laughing because I held it up to my ear to hear, and I heard you. I just start laughing. She goes, "What are you laughing at?" I'm like, "All right, so let me give you some context to this." And so I told her the story of us hanging out at Winterstrong and just reminiscing over this freaking 15-year-old video, or however old it is,
Yep.
and just dying laughing like little 10-year-old boys during the dinner that night. And
Yeah. It's like when you.
before I
It's like when you have something you're not supposed to. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what it was. And before I had even finished like the first phrase of it, Molly finished the line. Like she knew
Oh,
like right away. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, can't tell you how many times I've seen that video since college." And I'm like, "Oh man, then you'll understand this perfectly."
well, it was. It was. There was like. It was just one of those times. I don't know if it would have been funny anywhere else, but with the rain and everything else that was going on, it was so freaking perfect. It was just. It was one of those things. But it's funny. You talk about 15-year-old video there, and then you send me a guitar video, and I immediately reply back with
Mm-hmm.
the Taco Bell's Cannon,
Yes.
dubbed over with a guy just shredding a guitar, which is 17 years old,
It's like
and
one of the
just
original OG viral YouTube videos.
yep. Well, that was the one that I remember. Like when I saw that video and I saw the view count, it's just called guitar,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
literally this guy over Taco Bell's Cannon, and it's incredible, like his dexterity and his playability. But that was when I realized that YouTube was a lot different than I ever imagined it would be.
Yep.
Because I looked at the comments and there was Cyrillic, like from Russia, there was Japanese letter. I mean, it was like people from around the world were checking
Yeah.
this guy out. And most of the stuff I'd been privy to before that was like, oh, here's Waylon Jennings, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. And it's like, get her done. So
Yeah.
I can pretty much guarantee that didn't come from Russia or
You probably know the
Zimbabwe.
guys who commented it.
We're boys. We're
Yeah,
boys.
exactly.
So,
Well,
but yeah, it's amazing how some of that entertainment stuff sticks. How those things. When you sent me that was the first place my mind went.
it was so funny to watch that because I mean, literally, it's 17 years old. I was 13 years old when that video
Yeah.
came out, and I remember like sitting when we had computer room in my house.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this was the computer room, and
Yep.
me and my friends would sit around and watch that on loop. And I'm thinking like myself, I'm like, man, that was more than I mean, that was 2.5 almost times my life ago,
Yeah.
or half my life ago from that moment. But
Yep.
and then thinking that dude, because he was, I think, a teenager or like around 20, maybe at the oldest when he did
Yeah.
that, and like he's pushing 40 probably now,
Yeah.
or like
He
mid to
shipped
late 30s.
he ships boxes out of UPS in Toledo.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly. Like he's like, yeah, that's me in that video. And like, what do you mean your head's down covered with a hat? How like that's the story.
Yeah. Well, he crescendoed at 14.
Yeah, exactly.
One of
But
the best comments on that though, the first comment I saw was like, I remember seeing this video vividly and remembering I was going to play guitar or wanted to play guitar. I've never done that, but this video is still cool.
it makes me think too about like the difference. I don't know that a video like that really even exists now because of how fast viral things come and go. You know what I mean? Like I remember like, and that was the same thing with that that other video we're talking about, that funny one,
Yeah.
the guy tripping on acid in his closet. Like there was like a month or multiple months where like that was the thing everybody was talking about and knew what was going on. And now because of how fast things go viral, I mean, you can get like 20 million views on something in a couple hours, and then the next day, nobody, like everybody's moved on. So like there's no like cultural lasting impression on anything like that. Even in this such a short amount of time, it's like crazy to think that that's what it's already evolved to.
Well, something about that I've long thought about, and I think we even talked about it on one of the episodes here a while back. But there's no continuity of entertainment between generations
Yeah.
any longer. Like when I was a kid, we had Looney Tunes and we had the Honeymooners, we had Andy Griffith, and we had all these other MASH. Like all the shows that my parents watched or my grandparents watched. And you look at some of the cartoons, you had Scooby Doo and you had Batman with Adam West and all these things that were 30, 40 years of it was on just because it had been on before, and it was on because it had been on before. But in talking about those things, like with my parents, I can reference things that they understand. My son comes in talking about some dude on YouTube that's a gamer, and I'm sitting here watching. It's like you're watching a dude for 4 hours play a game.
Like, what do you mean, gamer?
Yeah, like I wanted to fight the kid that held the remote control too long. Like I want to play the game. I don't want to watch somebody else play the game.
Exactly.
But he explained it to me too that these games are, ours were just two-dimensional. You do the same jump every time you beat the board.
Right.
And this is like, man, this is just a couple iterations away from the real thing. I mean, it is so incredible. The great stories, the music. I mean, these things are full-on productions.
Well, and I remember when that kind of started to shift with like the Halo games.
Halo, Grand Theft Auto.
When those games kind of with and it became much more immersive, and then I'm looking, and because I had the same reaction. I think I've told you I train a couple of local kids around here still, and one of them is 16, and so like he's right around the same age as yours, and so he like Twitch and all of these other things talking about all these guys on YouTube. Like it literally right over my head. It's the oldest I ever feel when I'm talking to him. And so he shows me one of them, and I'm watching a dude for like a couple minutes. He wanted to show me a clip. He's like, well, look, this is what I mean. This is what I mean. So he shows me, and it was just a dude playing like a Call of Duty game, which I've played my fair share of. But the thing that was crazy was the sensitivity set up so high on this guy's controller. Like it's moving so fast, it makes my head hurt. Like, I don't know how the reaction time and stuff and I remember thinking, I'm feeling pretty good about how I can maneuver around this game, and then you like see somebody who's like really good at it or has that type of, I don't even know what skill that would be considered, dexterity or anything like that. And I'm just like,
maybe
hand-eye, and I'm just like, holy crap. They're a different species of video game right now. I don't even understand.
Yeah. I think it's, as much as, even the other episode that we did this week, I sit there and I talk about things and I hear myself because I went back and listened to it just because when we do these, I tend to black out. Like I literally don't recall what we talked about. And that for me is kind of an indicator that things are going pretty good.
Yeah.
But I also know that I get pretty loose when I'm comfortable. So I go back and I'm like, who did I offend? What did I say wrong? But I hear myself talk, and I'm very conscious of the fact that, it could be one of these things where it sounds like I'm hyper negative about technology. I'm hyper negative about the advancements of these things. I am not negative. I am extremely concerned and cautious. I think these things, if used for good, could probably, not save the planet necessarily, but do tremendous good for everyone.
Yeah.
But that's really anything. The thing that I was considering after I listened to it was that is true of any weapon. Like if firearms were only used for good, imagine what the world would look like if whatever it is, automobiles were only used for good. Like I don't know what the hell you use them for bad for, but you know what I mean? It's just you can get in a place where you think, man, this is bad. It's bad in the wrong hands.
Exactly.
And that's something that's kind of given me some peace in the last few days. It's just thinking, I'm looking at this wrong.
Yeah.
The medium itself is not toxic. It is our human nature that creates it to be toxic or can make it toxic.
Well, and think about like the what's the plot to almost every single like James Bond kind of, spy thriller Jason Bourne kind of, it's always like some form of technology, like we can't let this fall into the wrong hands,
Yeah.
and like that's what it is. It's like
Yep.
there's people that will use whatever for evil, no matter
Yep.
what the thing is, and even things that you didn't necessarily think were capable of being used for bad deeds or evil deeds, Oh, I'm kind of losing you here, bub.
Second. It's kind of
There
in a
we go.
weird area.
Got you back.
Okay, you got me now. So what
Yep.
I was saying there was, I had a guy tell me one time, he was like, the devil will have you convinced that he's God's best friend, and that's kind of the way a lot of this works is you don't have to go in this for any other way except what you want, but we're so highly influenced, we're so easily influenced, and what we see, like my son, he will play those games in accord with the way he's watched people play those games. We're very monkey see monkey do, and that's where I think as a parent with some of these games, with some of the online chat, that you walk in and you look at the chat screen, it's like a kid's 16 years old, should he be seeing some of this stuff? But it's it's generalized shit talk.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also like, what do you do in that situation? Do you say no video games because I think they're bad, or do I sit down and try to understand how they're a lot cooler than I realize they are because he thinks they're good,
Right.
And the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, because that's a tale as long as the games have been around, even when they were what we would consider probably remedial compared to what some of them are now. You know what I mean? Like that's the argument as long as they've been around, is how they can warp and desensitize to violence, and like that's what it's always been. So
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the age that they're introduced plays a factor, but I mean you can have this conversation about any kind of game, no matter how violent it actually is,
Yeah. Did you play a lot when you were younger?
Not like, yes, but also not where it was like, that's all, it wasn't my thing that I did. Like I did it when we went somewhere and played with friends. Like it was like an event to do it. So like guys would come over and we'd play video games for a few hours or something like that. Like it wasn't a part of my day. Like, so because we had other stuff going on all the time. Like we were doing stuff, we were in sports, we were in practice, we're training, we're just hanging out, doing other things. But I remember like I mentioned before, when Halo kind of started taking off and we started doing like the LAN parties, like we would go over to a buddy's house like on a Friday night and just order a bunch of pizzas, and like literally everybody would bring like their Xboxes, and we'd just play for like a handful of hours that night, and then not even play all night. Like we'd go do other stuff, but it was always centered around like it was its own event. It wasn't like, I'm just going to do this because I do it for 2 or 3 hours every day kind of thing.
No, I get that 100% because that's a lot like mine was. I mean, I remember getting I was maybe a year or two behind the Nintendo. Like when the Nintendo came out, it had been out a couple of years, and then we got one. My parents were super blue collar, hardworking people. That was an expense that wasn't rational for us. So it took a year or two to get one, and pretty much had Super Mario, Duck Hunt. Got a few, like Top Gun. That was another game I played a lot. But I was the same way. I mean, I had rules as a kid that I had to be outside until the sun went down. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts. Like you're outside until the sun is down. When that street light comes on, you've got 10 or 15 minutes to be home. Then it's homework. Then it's shower. Then it's dinner. And then if you have any time left, you can play your video game. Well, my parents sequenced that in such that I would always walk into my bedroom 10 minutes after my bedtime. So it's like in the bed, so there was, but much for me, it was like, when I was playing basketball, the guys on the basketball team would get together on a Friday night, 7, 8 of us over to Guy's house, and we play NBA Live tournaments. Or
we did the same thing with Madden tournaments and stuff.
Same. So that was more mine. When I got into college, GoldenEye was a game changer for me. No pun intended, game changer, but it was that. I guess I said Grand Theft Auto, but that was my real introduction to that first player visual
on the
game.
64.
Yep. And dude, and it was just so cool because I grew up, my dad, that's probably one of the deepest connections my dad and I have is James Bond.
Yeah.
Like that was something that if it didn't matter if it was, you remember TBS had the James Bond 7 Days of Bond? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So my dad on those 7 days, it wasn't like we sat down and watched a marathon, but we pick one or two movies a day and kind of watch them and stuff. And really, when I think back about it, my childhood with my father, he worked a lot, he was gone a lot, um, loved me, but it's just one of those things, he's kind of a quiet, loving
Hmm.
type. And so those things like, hey, come over here and let's watch, Diamonds Are Forever or Dr. No or any of them, and that was just one of those standout memories for me. So I think that probably bleeds into why I love that game so much because I knew the storylines. But that was huge. Um, but in college, when I got a PlayStation 2, it was more of the Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
There was another game I played too. I played a lot of Gran Turismo. I love race cars. I
Yeah.
love racing. So I did a lot of that stuff too. But yeah, man, it's just a strange thing how we find entertainment for ourselves, whether it be video games, movies, music, whatever. Um, I think no matter what, like when my dad first got Zeppelin 1, 2, and 3, his parents were pissed. Like
Yeah.
so it's always something that I try to caution myself on is like damning with absolution. I try to see what my son's doing and take it with eyes of his age. Like, what did I think
Yeah.
about things when I was his age? And I surely fail at that a lot, but being conscious of it is a step to doing better at it.
Well, and I think I mean, there's the difference between that and having like zero restrictions. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
there's got to be, especially raising ones, you got to
yeah,
like there is some form of you have to have some limits, whether it's time, what is type of content past a certain age or till a certain age, just for the sake of, I mean, now that I'm in this position, right? Like,
yeah,
and this is what we're talking about. Like, we're trying to understand it when you're 12, you don't. But then now I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, my son's 3, and I'm like, there's definitely stuff that he's not seeing. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And that's obviously different being a toddler. But even as they start to get older, I got 2 cousins that are 10 and 14. And so I'm
yeah.
like, I'm even thinking for them, I'm like, man, there's stuff that I still am like, if I don't know that I would want you guys being around or seeing yet, you know?
That's a hard one too because like for my son, he's on a football team, he's on a baseball team. I know how those locker rooms are. I know
Yeah.
how 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old boys think. So it's like you're not only combating like his impulses or his thinking,
Yeah.
you're combating the reinforcement by 30, 40 other kids his age too.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes difficult. And I think that is just where that if you just go in brazen and yelling and like, you can't do this, you can't
Yeah.
do this, for a kid like me, I am going to search the ends of the earth to do exactly what you told me I couldn't do.
Yeah.
So for me, I think approaching it as in, well, let's talk about why, let's talk about what you actually are willing to admit that is kind of sketch or a little
Yeah.
bit like risque, and then go from there. Because I mean, these video games, they're not designed for 13-year-old kids. They're
Yeah.
they're designed to appeal to 13-year-old kids, but they're more designed for like 20 somethings.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
it's a little bit older content. But dude, I think everything in the entertainment world has lowered that level of entry as far as age. Like you've got kid rappers out here 14, 15, 16 years old talking about shooting people, selling crack, and I know those are realities.
Yeah.
So where does a person draw the line of like, this is biographical information true to this individual story,
Right.
versus like, okay, here's a guy over here doing everything right and his story is more meaningful than this one just because I say so. So it's a tricky road. I mean, like for example, how old were you? Like, what was the first risque movie you saw?
I remember the first rated R movie that I was allowed to see was Die Hard.
Yeah,
And we watched Die Hard like around Christmas time because I remember my mom was decorating Christmas tree while we were watching it.
yep,
And so I remember that being the first one. Um, I remember The Matrix being pretty early on because I mean,
yeah,
you gotta remember that came out in '98 and I was 6, so I wasn't 6 when I watched it,
yeah,
but I was probably 8 or 10 when I saw that one the first time, to maybe 10 or so. But I think it started more with the violent part of stuff first,
Yeah.
You know, like they eased me in like on some of those movies with the like, because and looking back on it, it's pretty tame violence in those older 80s movies because it's kind of
Yeah.
cheesy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like with Die Hard and
Steven Seagal violence.
yeah, and like the shot blood caps that are clearly blowing out of the shirt when the dude gets hit with bullets, you know. So I mean, it was kind of that kind of stuff, which like I get that as being an easier route to go than like even like some of the things now they're just, I mean, because hyper realism is kind of what grabs people's attention now. Like if there's any kind of cheesiness like kind of those old 80s movies would have had, like it just, I don't know that it is as popular right now. You know what I
Well,
mean?
that's like Jaws, right?
Yeah.
When Jaws first came out, people were literally like, that is the realest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Well, 5 iterations of CGI or cinematronics later, not even talking now, like talking early 90s versus late 70s, you look at Jaws and it's like, is that just cardboard floating around in the ocean? Like
some dude in a box.
yeah. So it's like even some of the stuff like that I would have considered, like, even the Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yeah.
Looking at it now, stuff that was just cutting edge, unbelievable. I'm like, oh, I can see it now.
Yeah.
But it's almost like you can't until you see something better. And I'll be real honest with you about that. I follow a page that posts a lot of Stoic stuff, a lot of Jordan Peterson stuff, and some of their stuff hits the mark, and some of it's a bit different than my taste. But I will tell you this: they posted something 2 or 3 days ago, and as Instagram always does, like you watch it and then you go to like save it or send it to someone. I was actually going to send it to you and Logan, but you watch this thing, and I go to send it, and it refreshes before I can do it, and I never could find it again.
Yeah.
But long story short, it was showing some of the advancement in this AI pornography, and it was very like you could show it in a church and it'd be informational. It was not sexual; it was informational. Everything was blurred out, but they were showing these images that were completely digitized. They were not real at all, but they were showing that they had put like famous celebrities' faces on these characters.
Oh.
And I am telling you right now, as sure as I'm looking at my hand in front of my face, you could not tell that these people were CGI. I mean,
wow.
that level of good as far as quality and production quality on something like that. Like, I don't even know that Hollywood has approached that point, even with the new Avatar. Like, this looked like a very, very different, specific type of technology that was like, I can't imagine where this is going to go. And again, not to sound fearful of it all, because some of this can be great, but in this context and in some of the more damaging type contexts, I think it's a real scary thing. So I don't know what it makes me feel. It's just a
that's one of those things that like that can be very obviously used for very nefarious purposes.
Well, that's my fear. Trickle down effect to where end user is an app on your phone. You take a photo of your friend beside you, and you can manipulate them into any storyline that you want.
Yep.
With indiscernible accuracy.
Yeah.
And that's what's scary, because it's like, well, was this person actually here? Was this person actually wearing this? Was it? You can scale it to whatever measure. It's just, man, as much as we talked about the news, just people's sense and grasp of what is real and what isn't, is getting so close, and that's what's fearful for me. And where does entertainment go from that? Like, at what level of entertainment are we satisfied with saying, okay, this is all I need, this is enough?
Well, and they see with that AI technology and like the de-aging thing that they're doing on actors now. Like Harrison Ford is 80 years old, and he's got another Indiana Jones movie coming out. And they had like a big chunk of the movie where they do the de-aging thing to make him look like he did in the 80s. And like the clips of it legitimately looks like Harrison Ford in 1985 on the screen. And it's so trippy.
Well, something else that kind of bothers me, in that same regard, I don't want to get too off topic, but in the same regard, what happened to aging gracefully? What happened to the idea that wrinkles on your face meant life lived?
Yeah.
And I in the last few years have noticed more and more that, you know, the authors that I read are grittier, the photos that I like are grittier. I am just so turned off by the hyper polished, hyper
Yeah.
filtered, like BGATs. He's a buddy of mine, photographer, does some real gritty street black and white photos.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, his stuff, I think most people would look at it and be confused because the subject matter is not their reality. But for me, it's like it's perfect because that is the world that we don't want to see. That is the world that we hide our eyes from. We do not cast light on that world of drugs and guns and violence and all this stuff. And he's in there snapshotting portraits
Yeah.
of these people, you know. And I just he's just a super cool dude. Got a great eye, but I am finding myself more inclined to that. So I think at 40 years old, I'm starting to fall into that category of, well, back when I was young, you know, I find myself saying that shit a lot more and more. And that's a dangerous place to be too. Like, you don't want to lose sight of the times and become a dinosaur. You just don't. Right. I mean, have principles, but also don't become a stick in the mud.
There was two examples that I just thought of as you were talking about the aging gracefully, how that's like not a thing anymore. One is just recently this whole Madonna thing, right? Like, she literally looks pretty straight up demonic to a degree with the like level of creepiness and fillers. And I mean, it doesn't look like her at all. Like,
right.
There's no way you could ever tell, but it's that idea that she can't let go the fact that she's in her 60s. Right.
Yeah.
But then you look at other actresses that like fully, and I can't remember what her name was, but I saw somebody do a side-by-side comparison. But she's the lead singer of the Bangles, like the old 80s. And she's like she's the same age as Madonna, but she just totally embraces the fact that she looks younger than, you know what I mean? And then the other thing, I actually just seen this Twitter thread. I was going to send it to you because it ties it right in. There's this filter there's this thing going around on TikTok, I guess, where the like kind of Gen X, middle-aged, 50s and aged people are finding this filter and they're filming themselves using it that like teenagerizes their face. And it shows the side-by-side of them now and then them like teenagerized. And it's really realistic, whether or not they actually look like that as teenagers, but the thread shows like 12, 15 of these videos, and it breaks people. Like it emotionally just wrecks people seeing themselves as teenagers. And so I'm thinking like, why? If you're in this place where you're so, and we kind of talked about this the other day, like with the guy that just harkens back to high school football all the time, and you're not in that moment where you're like, look, I'm 50 and I know stuff. I like embracing this phase of wisdom and understanding parts of life. Like, it's sad that they actually like it just wrecked. And then there was two at the end that were the best part of the whole thing, because there's probably this lady like in her late 60s and she was just giddy. She laughed and thought it was the most hilarious thing ever. She's like, I can't with this thing. This is whatever. Like, and she was just laughing about the whole thing. But there was several that emotionally just wrecked these people. It was so crazy to see that response.
I think for me, when I look at that, I don't fault anybody. I mean, obviously I train, I want the reward as far as how I look, how I feel, how I perform. Like, I am not above saying that I want to improve myself. I want to better myself. I want to look my age. I don't necessarily want to look older than my age, but I'm comfortable and happy to be an age. Like, I got gray in my beard. I've got bald on my head. So it's like, I can probably shave my face and get some hair transplants, but that's not really what I'm going for either. And I think, you think about this icon era of women, like you had Sophia Loren, Raquel Welch, who was the girl who played in Octopussy. She was one of the Bond girls. But, this class of women, they were symbols of beauty, maybe not like sexual icons in their later years. They became more like that elegant beauty or refined beauty. And I'm sure they had plastic surgeries of some sort, and they did whatever skincare, things like that. And I'm not just saying it's women, there's men too, which is really strange to me, that the uptick of like 20 something guys that are having fillers put in their lips and plastic surgeries and all this stuff. It's like, how fake do we want this world to be before we're happy? Like,
Yeah.
how fucking fake do we want the world to be before we look at it and we say it's beautiful? I think there's something to seeing somebody age gracefully, and there's beauty in that. To
Yep.
me, there's something in that where, like you said, it tells me that that person is not giving up. It's more that they are just self-aware that no matter what surgery, no matter what cosmetic product, no matter what thing they do to themselves, it will not be a time machine. It's not going to take them back. So yeah, dye your hair if you like to, shave your beard if you need to, work out if you want to. All of these things to better yourself, but don't lose perspective. Like, what is the angle of a guy that's 50 trying to look 30 except bang young girls? And what's a 50-year-old wanting to bang young girls for anyway? Like, what the hell is the problem there? So is it the motivation to look a certain way, or is there a root that's a menace? You know?
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't have answers for any of this shit. I just keep asking questions.
That's all we do.
That's all we do. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because we were, you had mentioned, and you had told me this before, and Justified is kind of a like bonding point that you and I have as like one of our favorite shows. And I went on, like I said, kind of a rabbit hole watching some clips from that show yesterday, and then I sent you that the ending of that show is top 3 to 5 endings of a TV show for me.
They
how
got
they
it
tie
right.
everything together. They did it, and it ended, and it was perfect.
Yep.
And like tied the ends that needed to be tied. And then I have said ever since I watched it, because I didn't watch it as it was happening. I started watching it after it had ended, and then just cranked through all of it.
Yep.
And I have said Walton Goggins as Boyd is the best TV bad guy ever, and in the running for like just best well-written villain, like character arc ever. And so I know that, like, literally when I talked to you about it the very first time I had brought it up, because I mean that's home, you know, like for you literally. And and I have a buddy who's who went to college up here, knows my wife real well. We're friends, and he's from around that area too. And I asked him when I was like in the throes of watching it, I'm like, is this like an accurate representation of like the area and the people and all this kind of stuff? And I asked him, and he's like, because whatever county's right next to Harlan is where he's from.
Yeah. Okay.
And I can't remember which one it is. And he goes, boy, they really dressed up Harlan for that show. I'll tell you that. And I'm like, I'm like, holy cow. And he goes, yeah, it's bad. And they actually did a good job of representing that. But I just wanted to ask, like, I mean, you being from that area and having a show that's tied that closely to like the culture of that area, like, what was that like watching that as it was going on? Was that just like a crazy experience?
Well, honestly, I mean, you know, on others, the church and there's fantastic people hold down jobs, and then you've got the other side that's outlaws and cut loose, you know, and that's my family, that's my background and my family. That's why I've gotten in some of the shape and conditions I've gotten in over the years, is because, you know, it's part of a culture around here that, I mean, Country Boy Can Survive was not written just as a dream. Like, that is exactly the mindset of these people down here. Good people, but I'll tell you what, you know, if Granny's upset, well, there's a cousin or a brother or an uncle or somebody that's going to make sure she's not, you know, and you can read into that whatever you will, but I'm just saying, if somebody hurts somebody you love around here, somebody's going to pay for it. And I mean, I'm not saying killing always, but I'm saying, I mean, I got some cousins that they're firebugs. They've sent some messages about burning houses down. So, you know, a couple times with people in it, but that is a real thing, and they've done jail time for it, and they got out, and they're right back in the same boat again, doing their same things that they do. So maybe Hollywood peeled the onion back a little bit, but I would say That's a good way to put it. They sure made it look like a civilized place on TV, as uncivilized as it looked. Because I promise you, there's some hollers. Nobody wants to go down.
Yeah.
It's just the truth of it. And I mean, that's not to glorify and make it sound more than it is. I'm just telling you, some of these people won't ask they won't ask a question before they shoot you in the face. I mean, that's just that's the truth. And I mean, that's no different than an inner city. And that's what I've always compared when people talk about that, is like the cultural. Oh, it's this cultural stuff of the inner city. It's holding these people down. Go to West Virginia, go to Eastern Kentucky, go to these places and look, because I promise you, it is not a racial divide, it is an economic, social class divide that is being held down. The same stories, the same type of kill or be killed, eat or get eaten kind of mentality exists in the inner city, just like it does in the holler. So I think it is an unkind reality.
Yeah.
That some people in this world have it harder than you, and we get to judge that from that level of I'm above this. When you're in it, and I've lived around it and in it my whole life, when you're in it, all you're thinking about is getting through to tomorrow and paying that gas bill. Does not matter how it's done. So for right, wrong, whatever, that mindset has probably pushed me to levels in my life for greatness, whatever it takes. And it's put me in the darkest days too, whatever it takes. So it is balancing that edge. And I think that's why nobody gets out. That's why it is such a common story that people don't get out of it, because, hey, somebody wronged your brother, come back. Somebody wronged granny, come back. So even when you're out, those heartstrings are still there, that loyalty is still there, and that care and that concern is still there. You're always going back on that phone call. Well, and if you're not, I don't know who you are.
Well, to tie it to the show, I mean, that's the crux of the whole relationship between Raylan and Boyd, is like Raylan got out. And and they have, that's the whole, why that last line, why he came and delivered the news to Boyd in person, like, because they're still, they're the Batman and the Joker. Like, they're completely different, but they're the exact same. And he said, we dug coal together. There's that experience. Like, we're from the same place. We're the same. And it doesn't matter. Like, I got out, but I came back just so I could, that's kind of the whole crux of the relationship, which is why I freaking love that show, is how well it was written.
Well, I'll tell you this much, man, the drug dealers and outlaws that I've run around with and know always had somewhat of that Robin Hood appeal.
Yeah.
I mean, like, even Escobar down in Colombia, that was his whole thing.
Yep.
The government, he waged war on the Colombian government, but fed people, built soccer stadiums, he killed a ton of Colombians too. I'm not trying to make him out to be a good guy.
Right.
But that is why it continues to happen in these areas of extreme poverty, because you get somebody who's got a little brains about them, a little ambition, and then they give it back to the same people that need it. It's like, so in that situation, again, looking at it from a 50,000 foot view, I can be like, man, the corruption is real. This is awful. This is not good. This is not productive. Those people need to eat. Yeah. So they're going to get that food however they can. And if the drug dealer comes around and he's like, hey, honey, I brought you some groceries. Thank you so much. To the older women. Do you remember the mob movies like Whitey up in Boston? Mm-hmm. That's what he did. He took bread to all the old women in the neighborhood. Yep. Like, he wanted the support of the people. All the good ones. Right. All the good ones do that. Yeah. They look out for people, and that's why they're heralded, and that's why it is a way of life to this day.
And it's really interesting that show in particular. I mean, it was popular, but I don't know that it's like thought of as being some great show by and large compared to like a lot of these others, because I'm thinking of it and how it represents an area, right? And by and large, from like you and I talking, did a really good job in that regard. But then you contrast that with like Yellowstone right now, which like is just a soap opera with 3 murders an episode. And like, there's no redeeming qualities in any of the people in the show. Like, any of the characters in the show, they're all meant to be like bad guys that are the good guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like, it's super strange to see those two contrasted, because I think people actually would connect with characters like Boyd from Justified more than like John Dutton. You know what I mean?
I do, because here's the thing. There's not many people watching that show with John Dutton money. But
That's
every
true.
person that would watch Justified is one or two generations away from somebody with that kind of lifestyle. You know, you go back into the turn of the century, 1900s, early 1900s, and so on up. People lived a lot the same.
Yeah.
You know, it was only once the skyscrapers started coming and the automobiles started coming, the city life started to become a little more lucrative. You wanted to polish your shoes a little bit more. You wanted to have a little nicer suit. But man, the fact of the matter is, that's what it is appealing to, like a Yellowstone. It is appealing to the Columbia and the Yeti boys and the, you know, we're going to get a cowboy hat, we're going to get our Lucchese boots, and we're going to get our, you know, we've never ridden a horse or worked a day in our lives at any manual labor, but we're going to look the part. Nobody wants to dress like anybody on Justified. You know what I mean? And I think that's a part of a difference too. But I think the cultural difference as at large is that, by and large, the people of Eastern Kentucky, the people of West Virginia, the people of Southern Virginia, the people of Northern Western Carolina have been bastardized and forgotten by the government. Mm-hmm. So their story is not a story that is often told as a heroic story.
Yeah.
As someone who just went to work every day, handled their business, hell, maybe bootlegged a little liquor to get by, or maybe ran some this or that to get by. People don't want to hear that because that's ugly and that's hard. But I think if people look, they would see more of that in the lives around them, maybe in a different outfit, than they would of Yellowstone. Yellowstone is a fantasy show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
totally.
it is unattainable entertainment.
Yep.
Justified, you come see me and I can take you an hour from where I live and I'll put you in the heart of all of it. We go an hour and a half and you can be in Boone County, West Virginia with Jesco White and the Whites from West Virginia.
Yep.
So I'm in that place. I'm in, like, you know, you shake that pill bottle, that's a Kentucky mating call. You know, like that's the way of the world in these parts, and I think it is because it is a hopeless, by and large, place. The people are not hopeless at all.
Right.
It's just the structure is set it up to make it a hopeless place at times. And then they get you in that generational bullshit with the coal mines. Well, your daddy's gone, but you still owe his debt. So coming out of high school, you can make 125 grand. You can have the razors and the side by sides and the boat and the big truck and stuff, because they're all doing in-house financing for you. But guess what? You're going to work 60 years to pay it all off. And then when you die, your boy's going to inherit it because he's going to be right in the same place. So it is a system of same. There's no progression there. Even though the money's better, even though the houses are bigger, even though the cars are nicer, there is no real progression of the human spirit in those areas.
Man, that's just such a crazy juxtaposition between even just the portrayal, right?
Yeah.
And the fantasy version, like in Yellowstone that you mentioned, I'm sure you've probably seen it. It's just the dumbest thing I've ever seen that's come up the last couple of days. Like that chick that did that music video, like the fake country music video. Have you seen that yet?
No, thank God.
I'm glad you. I don't even want to send it to you, but I want to send it to you. And it's like just the most generic pop country, like cheesy music video with some blonde gal, like in her 20s, singing it, and it's just awful. Every word just is just like cheesy, cliche country crap. Yeah. And I read a couple of the comments, and all the video is like her standing around a truck, around a lake, like drinking out of the back of the tailgate kind of a thing with a bunch of people. And it's trying to portray like she's some country gal, like all of that fake pop country crap does, you know. Yeah. And like the first comment I saw was, I'm going to tell you how I know that this is a fake video. That fence that's behind that truck is vinyl. It's not barbed wire. I'm like that's how you spot it right there. It's stuff like that. It just killed me. Yeah. And I'm like, even around, you know, where I'm from in Southern Idaho, where it's all farmland, right? Like it's a totally different type of country life, you know, because it's, you know, we're not, where your version of country life is totally different than ours, but there's a bunch of similarities there too. Like kids are rodeo kids and like farmer kids and that kind of stuff. And you can tell when there's real ones and when there's not pretty quick. You know what I mean?
Well, this is a terrible self-description, but just maybe for somebody to kind of get a grasp of the area that I grew up in, not necessarily exactly, but just the culture of the areas that I'm around and the places that I've been. I know a lot of people probably heard of Yellow Wolf, but he has a company called Slum American, and it is like all representative of the blue collar guy, whether that's working in a farm, wearing blue jeans and a Wrangler button up and boots, or if that is wearing, they call it low country fashion, where it's like ripped jeans, blacked out, leather jackets, cowboy hats, like looking like the devil in disguise. And that's always been somewhat my style, is, not that like I'm trying to bounce around and be a chameleon or try to play a part, but it's like I have wide ranging interests, because it's like, hey, we're going to go fishing. So you get your waders on, or you get your muck boots on, and you go fish. It's like, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to work at the farm. And then tonight we're going to go out. So that's 3 different outfits. You're wearing waders in the morning, you're wearing blue jeans in the afternoon, and then you're wearing your black blue jeans and snakeskin boots out at night. So
right.
But you see more of that kind of repetitive. You just get in where you fit in and wear what you wear where you're going. I don't know, man, but what other shows do you like besides Justified? I mean, that's a big one.
That's probably
I'll tell you one
my
for
favorite.
Me.
Yeah,
did you ever watch Mad Men?
I didn't. I don't know if that was just because age I was when it was popular. Like, I just wasn't into it at the time. And so, like, for a lot of these, with Justified probably being the exception, like, if I'm not into it while it's happening, I don't know if I do get into shows very often, like past when they were on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, Mad Men is one. So I worked in marketing. I had some stuff in college through business and marketing. So it was kind of an appeal from that. But Don Draper, the main character, John Hamm.
Yep.
Just like, man, you talk about the duality of a human being displayed through a character. That show goes deep. So that's one of my favorites. I think my favorite single season, from writing to acting to the polished, finished piece, is True Detective season 1.
I have heard so many people say that, and I've not watched it. So that might be my other exception, where I've got to watch that, because I've heard the first season is like one of the greatest seasons of television ever, and then it kind of wasn't that in season 2. So
so the thing about it is each season is its own story with its own
character. Okay, so it's not meant to tie together.
No, it's tying together in the sense that they're all detective stories. They're all kind of the realities of that world and kind of the goings on in it.
Yeah.
But man, Matthew McConaughey as Russ Cole, you want to talk about just a quote machine? Like, everything that guy says in there is just like just mind blowing, because it's the same feel to me when I watch that as when I first read Fight Club. And I know we talked about that last episode.
Yeah.
But when I first read Fight Club, the day before, I read a review of it that said some authors type on a typewriter. Chuck Palahniuk slams it with a sledgehammer. And that was kind of like, okay, I have to read this now.
Yep.
Of course, I agreed with it. But then the same kind of thing with True Detective. It's like they could have told the same story 1,000 different ways, but they told it in the way that it was like, that is real. That is gritty. But the coolest thing is, I think it's Corey Fukunaga, the guy that directed it. I think I said his name right. So he showed no explicit violence throughout the whole thing.
Okay.
Like suggestive violence, suggestive sexual assault kind of things. Like, it was all suggestive, off screen. And he was like, if I show you, you might not care one way or the other about what you see. If I lead you to the point of imagination, then you're going to see your worst fear. Love that. Loved it. And just show the visual. And what happened was he said, no, it is supposed to be your fear and my fear. And he was like, if we show it, we're just showing Hollywood's deception or depiction of fear.
Right.
And that's where I thought, he backed out of the project over that. He didn't want it to be blood and guts. He wanted it to be suggestive terrification, is what he called it.
Wow, that's cool. That's a cool interpretation for it to take, because I would imagine that would be, if he left over it, I would imagine that's because the much more popular / easier route would just have been to do the other thing,
Yeah, for sure. But he's done some other micro projects like 8-minute films, 6-minute films, a lot on the same kind of front where, the storyline is suggestive and you fill in the pieces. And
Yeah.
I think it's just such a unique art. And man, as a director, you got to have some balls. Like everybody's waiting, just like David Fincher in Seven. Everybody was waiting to see what was in the box. You had to imagine
they're never going to show it. Yep.
So I can go back through the scenarios of times in movies where what I didn't see was more impactful than what I would have seen.
Yeah.
That's what True Detective is at large. It is a case study on partnerships, as far as like men in a partnership job situation, the roles that they will play within themselves, the deception that they'll give to each other, the deception that they'll give to themselves. I mean, it's just a real gritty look at humanity on all fronts.
That perspective of doing it also makes me think of the end of Inception.
Oh, for sure.
Where it cuts before you know if the top falls over or not, and then everybody's ticked because they don't know. It's like, well, just believe what you want to believe.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about life is, so many times we don't get that perfect happy ending. We don't get that completed circle, and a lot of times life is just left to interpretation. Like, what is this now that it's over and I don't even know what that means? So that's another one. I'll go back and answer the other question. The first, I grew up on Rambo and Rocky, pretty young, pretty young, but man, the first racy, like sexy kind of scene I saw, I'll tell you two. One, when Pretty Woman came out, my mom and her sister watched it, and I don't know, I haven't watched Pretty Woman enough to know like if there was an actual sex scene or tits were out or whatever, but I remember them putting a blanket over my head when we were sitting there watching this movie on the couch, and like, you can't watch this. But my next door neighbor showed me Desperado with Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek, and then From Dusk Till Dawn with Salma Hayek, and that was kind of the beginning of all of it. Like, it just, there was no going back after that. Like, the movies, and it wasn't just the sex scenes or the violence or whatever. It was just movies that probably would have been age appropriate. After seeing that stuff, just felt like kiddie movies, if that makes sense. Like, I felt like I'm more mature because I've seen these things.
Right.
So
I'm beyond this.
Yeah, I'm beyond My Little Pony and He-Man now. Thank you.
It's like, how old are you? 9.
Yeah, I'm not. I have to send you a video of this girl. She's cussing at the camera. She's like, all these girls at school were saying, I'm like, 9. Bitch, I'm 11. Like, damn.
I'm trying to think of, because we did those old 80 action ones too. I remember when we did the first time we rolled through the Rockies, and we watched one each night for a week basically. And that was like, an event, because it was like, all right, it's time to introduce you to this. And then I remember when we did the Rambos, and then, like I said, we did Die Hards and all that. So it was like, that was kind of the first introduction, I would say, to like the violent action. And like I said before, I think that's probably a good or a better way to introduce it, through kind of those kind of campy, kind of over the top kind of action. You know what I mean? Where it's like, John Rambo is running through the desert, shooting exploding arrows, and it's like a little bit over the top, but it kind of eases you into it, if that even makes sense. Because I'm going to show you the most crazy extreme version of it to make it almost not real.
And it was also those things where somebody gets shot with a machine gun, and they're sitting there like dancing. You're like Tropic Thunder. Do you remember when Ben Stiller did that? When he was like running and his hands are up, and he almost looks like he's doing some kind of crazy ass dance.
That movie. Survive.
Oh, dude. jelly beans.
I don't remember if I just sent it to you the other day, but somebody had created a meme, and it said, because there's that new movie Air that's about with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck talking about Sonny and the guy that got Michael Jordan the Nike deal. And the thing was Robert Downey Jr. is going to play young Michael Jordan, and it shows him.
Oh yeah,
it shows him from Tropic Thunder.
I saw that, dude.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
It was so funny because it's like now that is like PC warfare now.
It's yeah. And they even tried to do it to him now. Like recently, remember he had to go on Rogan and like kind of clarify it, because all of a sudden there was all these young kids who had never heard it, and now they're like, "What's this movie about?" And I've maintained to this day that's his finest acting he's ever done in his life, was that movie.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Well, and like not to get off topic of movies and such, but like I just read that Roald Dahl is having his books recast and edited because of things that were written 50, 60 years ago. And it's like, I read the BFG. I read Matilda.
Matilda, yeah, they just did the Matilda musical thing.
I'm trying to think back of what was in there that was like problematic, but again, if I say anything like, oh, that's not problematic, then I'm the asshole, because I'm not apparently sensitive to whatever hurts somebody's feelings. Like, when the hell are people going to start getting some resolve again?
Yeah.
I think it has something to do with our movies. We have no movies, not many, where you have a true attainable hero figure.
Yeah.
You don't. I mean, when we were kids, Rocky, I mean, he was just a bum from Philly that fought his way to the top. I mean, there's 1,000 guys. I mean, there's 1,000 guys in boxing gyms that are just looking for a shot that are probably better than they'll ever prove. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you have Rambo, you have all the Schwarzenegger types. And I'm not saying that these are perfect casts for hero type movies, but all of our heroes today are the Avengers, are superheroes. Are people that we, no matter how hard we strive, can never have those powers, can never be that level of superhero. And I think some way that plays into the psychology. If you don't believe you can get to something, you don't even try.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, because when I was a kid, who didn't want to be Hulk Hogan or Arnold or Rambo or Rocky or whoever? Like every kid I wanted to be some of those figure types. I don't know who kids like some mumble rapper. Like
they want to be the YouTubers, dude.
That's what I'm saying. Our heroes are a very different class of hero these days. And I don't know if that means, because the world's definitely not safer or kinder. So it's not like we just need passive heroes. We need real action heroes again. The last action hero,
Tom Cruise,
Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's such a good movie. But the true last one is Tom Cruise. He's the last one. Like
Mission Impossibles.
Any of them. I mean, think about any of his movies, and he's like that example of kind of those. Yeah, they're a bit over the top, but they're like just fun movies to go watch. And he's just a dude in all of them. Like he's not, he's got the crazy tech and Mission Impossibles, and Top Gun was awesome. Like I don't know that there's anybody that makes those kind of movies anymore. And he's cool, like experiment that I've seen too, because he was in an interview once that I saw, and he watches one movie every single day of his life because he loves movies. Like he just loves the art of movie making. And so like he'll just pick one and watch it while he's doing stuff in the morning, or like sit down and watch, because he's like, I just love the art of making movies and it's fun for me, and I want to make fun movies for people to go watch. So like, him fighting Henry Cavill as two helicopters are rolling down a mountain at each other, and they're each in one of them, and they crash in and fall off a cliff. They both live, and he diffuses a nuclear bomb simultaneously. Like, that's pretty. I mean, but that's what all those 80s movies were. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's like the Bourne movies. Those movies still captivate me. Like every time that they're on TNT or USA, not so much now because I'm not like stationary very much, but you would get up at like 8:39, go work out, and you come back around 10 or 11. You know you're getting a series of movies that day that are like, you've seen them 750 times, but you're going to watch them, and that's the way the Bourne movies are. I always love those. They were super cool. And
those are like some of my dad's favorite movies. And so those are like ones that I remember watching with him a ton.
another connection point with my dad was, you know, I was adult, living my own life, doing my own thing, and watching those. Come back and I'm talking about them, and he's like, "Oh, those are great." So it was like, you know, it's kind of interesting to see the things that, as we've gotten older, and he's been a little bit more open about some of the things he did as a kid and whatever. Because when you're young, it'll tell you all the bullshit they did. But as you get older and like you go through your own lessons, they're like, "Oh yeah, I've done that 100 times in my life," you know, blah blah blah. So knowing him now, like a lot of our musical interests are the same. A lot of our movie type interests are the same. And I don't know if that's nature or nurture because I did watch the movies, I did listen to music with him, but I also found some of the commonalities myself, and then only found out that they were similar after the fact. You know, so it's kind of an interesting thing how that works.
So let's do. I want to play this game. So those movies that you always associate with just always being on TV, like you said, the Bourne ones. Like what are some of the other ones that like always come to mind? Is like if I'm flipping through and there's that. Remember the channel that just like slow scrolled and showed you what was on, like the TV Guide channel, right? Like what are those ones that you associate with being always on TV?
100% doesn't matter what my obligations are. If Tombstone is on,
Tombstone is a
audibly
great one.
for audibly, if I can hear it for 1 second, I'm finishing it. I will tell you a movie I won't watch, and this is something I don't know if I ever talked about it on a podcast. So throughout powerlifting, I'm not an overly superstitious person, but I noticed, like I was a big Russell Crowe guy, 1,000 times, and I did a meet in Columbus one year, and everything was on point. I was so strong, everything was going really well. Watched Gladiator the night before, bombed out of the meet. I was like, shit. So next time I'm around, it's a Saturday morning. I don't live till the afternoon flight. It's one of those deals, TNT, Gladiator, Saturday morning, 10:30 or whatever. Tore my pec. So I started to be like, limits on meat.
Done.
True story. And this is true story. I wake up January 26th of 2014, going about my stuff, getting my shower, getting my bag packed to go to the Staples Center to lift in the USPA American Open at that point. I come out, and my ride, the people I'm riding over to the event with, are in the room watching Gladiator. And I'm like, this can't happen. Like, I didn't even say anything. I was like, this is not a good sign. Go to the meet, Nickelback is playing when I walked my squat out and I blew my knees out. So I actually avoided Gladiator for a long time because of that. And I
crazy.
And if I die in a car wreck tomorrow, fuck Gladiator. But I ended up watching it again, and nothing too bad happened. But yeah, I would say Tombstone. I would say the Bourne movies. I would say there's another one I'm trying to think of. Man, what is the Ocean's movies? Ocean's 11 and 12.
Yes.
They're just like fun entertainment, you know.
Yes.
So
and I don't know that I'll stop on it every time, but I always associate it with just being always on. Like multiple times a week, it's always on if I'm scrolling. Was The Replacements? That one was always on TV, and I actually probably would stop on that most of the time. But I think there's probably several Keanu movies because like Speed and Point Break are always on those like those TBS or TNT channels and that kind of stuff. But dude, those movies, I remember Molly had never seen Point Break until I think it was just several months ago. Yeah. And so we watched it, and she's not big on even the cheesy violence. Like it just makes it not fun for her. Like she just avoids those kind of movies in general. So I was like, well, and it had been a few years. So I'm like, I don't think it's like that violent. And then the whole airport tarmac scene when like everybody just gets shot up. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that maybe there is like some kind of over the top cheesy violence in this movie. But
I was going to ask you. Call just came through for some reason.
Oh, you're good.
1 second. So, anyhow, and fell asleep watching it. But it's such a good movie. As it's like it's one of those movies you can only get the same impact from it for the first time. You can never replicate the feeling that you get. It's kind of like The Sixth Sense. Once you learn the outcome, you don't get the same surprise. Inside Man and Denzel Washington.
Oh, yes.
Have you watched that? That movie
I have not seen that in years.
That movie is so good. It's a Spike Lee joint.
Spike Lee joint.
Yeah, that's what he puts on all his films. It's not a Spike Lee movie; it's a Spike Lee joint. So,
that's hilarious,
but yeah, that's
dude.
a good
not seen that movie forever.
And the way that he does it, like the first scene, he tells you his name, and he's like, "I don't repeat myself, and I've already told you my name." And then he goes on, and he's like, "This is the win, this is the why, this is the rub." Oh, dude, that movie is really, really good, man.
Those like early 2000s Denzel movies were all killer.
Training Day.
Killer.
Get me on Training Day.
Man on Fire. Yep. And there was a couple other ones.
Like some of the Bones. Was that him? No, that was Morgan Freeman. What was the one I was thinking about? I can't remember, but he was on fire in the early 90s. Oh man. Another one, speaking of Harrison Ford, The Fugitive. Dude, I watched that movie not too long ago. Another one that you're not.
What's the first one? Because isn't that a sequel?
No, it was the second. It was a remake of an original, but it is The Fugitive.
What's the one I'm thinking of? Clear and Present Danger.
Present Danger. Yeah.
Yes.
That was in the same time frame, but it wasn't.
That's right.
It wasn't a part of a series. But yeah, that's man, that was some good times in movies. That was right around the time Terminator 2 came out. Like, yeah, dude, those are some epic years for filming. And was that the last great age of film, do you think?
Well, that's what I mean with like the Tom Cruise stuff. Like they don't just make fun movies to go watch. Like you always have to be thinking about like these and like I don't have a problem with those kind of movies either, but there's the action movies that are just like let's just go have fun and disconnect for 2 hours. And then like the mid like the early mid 90s to early mid 2010 like ish areas of comedy movies like just don't get made anymore. Like all of those like the Jim Carrey style movies or the Superbads or all the Ben Stiller movies from the early 2000s, like none of those movies are like just fun comedy movies that are silly anymore. Like they're always incredibly over the top, like grotesque, and half the people won't watch them. Yeah, you know, and they're just like pushing the vulgarity and everything else in those movies, or it's just like they don't make them, and then the action movies are like it's always everything is the total extreme version of all of it now to be completely totally realistic as well. Yeah, and so it's like you just can't go disconnect and have a fun movie for 2 hours.
So I was in an arts and entertainment class in college. Was the movie called Rat Race? Was that what it was called? It was like 2001, 2, somewhere in there. Anyway,
is that the comedy one?
Yeah, I think it was. But it was
had Mr. Bean in it, right?
Yeah. So that was one of those first iterations. And he said this movie is the beginning of the end for Hollywood. And I'm like, why? And he goes on to talk about it. He said because they knew that if they got this star and this star and this star and did 3 minutes of trailers, they would make their money back. But you look at the second week box office and no one goes. Yeah. And that became a very real repetitive thing that we saw in Hollywood is you get the big name stars, you get enough of a story to make it somewhat curious for people to go. Huge opening. That's why they put so much emphasis on the opening weekend. Yeah. Because the bullshit hits the fan after that, right? Yep. You know, so that's why opening weekend and that buildup and those trailers and all that stuff is so huge. Because after that, then you're standing on the integrity of the film. And most of the stuff that they put out in the last 20 years, especially, is just hot garbage. It's like trash can juice. It's terrible. Yeah. You know? So
there's just no, because I'm almost stuttering for words because I'm trying to think of all the types of movies that I love that just like they don't get made anymore. And it makes me sound ancient, right? Like this is the well back in my day thing, and I'm 30. But like those types of fun comedies that I remember watching and going to theaters to see, like even the early Judd Apatow
Yep.
or the Judd Apatow stuff, or what's the guy who was Will Ferrell's partner forever?
Oh, Adam McVeigh.
Adam McKay.
McKay, not McVeigh. Yeah.
Adam McKay, yeah, like the Will Ferrell, Adam McKay stuff, the Ben Stiller stuff, but then even just like the 10 Things I Hate About You, we watched that like a couple months ago, and
Yeah.
Knight's Tale, like, dude, Knight's Tale is one of like my favorite movies ever.
Yep.
Maybe I just love Heath a ton, but
Yeah.
like those kind of movies, like there's just no fun movies. Like it's just a bummer. I get so ticked about
Yeah.
that because literally everything is just, and I like some superhero movies, but even that's getting a little saturated for me now. But
I'll be
like
honest.
it's all superheroes and sequels.
Done reimaginings of old movies that
Yeah.
it's to me, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but and digress. But I think for me, it is very indicative of a soulless creation when you do that.
Yeah.
And I say that because as a car guy, and my dad being a guy that he would buy cars, bondo them up, paint them, swap engines, swap rear ends. He was a car guy, muscle car era guy. So I grew up loving that stuff. I grew up admiring that stuff. And man, when they came out with the reimagination of the Mustang, I was like, that's really cool, but no.
Yeah.
Because it's not inspired. It's literally going back to somebody's real inspiration and saying, okay, we're going to round the edges, curve the nose, and make it more acceptable in a 2000 model vehicle.
Yeah.
Like, they lost me when they started doing that. Like the Chargers and the Challengers and all this stuff. Again, like, okay, if you're going to make a Challenger, let's make a really badass car. Like, that's why I applaud Corvette for going to the mid engine, because that is true inspiration in effect. Like, it's a front engine, high horsepower car for 50 plus years. And then, okay, maybe that inspiration has run its course.
Yeah.
What does the Corvette embody into the future? Different thing. So maybe some of these companies would be better to go back and look at these movies and say, I miss that feeling of watching this movie. How can I make a better movie for now? Not retelling that story, but telling a story that fits that in today's time. I just don't know. And that comes as a writer. Like, I grew up loving books, and I grew up writing in college and so on and so forth. But it's like, if I stole Greg Walsh's words, like, I can write an equivalent of a good paragraph or a good story. But if I just go and plagiarize Greg Walsh, then I am doing myself no good, and I'm doing the reader no good, because I'm attempting to be somebody I'm not, or create something that is not mine.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's like, even if I change the wording, the inspiration effect is gone. And I think that's where we are, is like, these movies are uninspired. These television shows are uninspired. It is just, they know those taglines of the title, the character recreation or whatever will have enough of a heart and money on the table for it. They're not looking to inspire you. They're looking to comfort you.
Yes. And the two examples actually are both the same actor-director combo that I can remember in recent years that actually delivered an original movie that was kind of harkening back to that, like, this is just fun and it's a good original movie. Now I can't remember the director's name, Sean Levy and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
So they did Free Guy, and then they did the Adam Project, which were like two completely original movies. And they were like really good. They weren't like earth-shattering great cinematic experiences, but they were like, these are fun, good movies, and it worked, and it's original, and it's Ryan Reynolds, so it's funny. But like, they did something, they went out there and they're like, this is our movie. We wrote it together. It's a good partnership, and we're just going to create a fun story. And I'm like, that's why I wanted to watch it. It ended up being awesome. Both of them did.
Yeah. I wish more people would do that. I wish more people would say, like, man, I don't want to work with this guy because he's like Brad Pitt. I want to work with this guy because he's my friend. Yeah. Because there's everything that Hollywood is like. I know it's always been the same. You have your leading stars and whatnot. But, man, some of these, you can't tell me there's not a better male actor than Brad Pitt that's 30 years old. Stop
Yeah.
trying to put him in 30-year-old roles.
Yeah.
Like, we'll circle back to what we talked about earlier on of like, you have these people who are trying to hang on to this ageism. Well, that's what we're being sold.
Yeah.
Like, Brad Pitt is playing 30-year-old roles or 25-year-old roles, and they're making him look 25 or 30 years old. So, like, at some point, it's keeping up with the Joneses when that's all you're sold is you have to look this way, you have to dress this way. I just think it's a real problem, and I think there's too. You know this from music as well as I do from writing. There are authors that will never be celebrated or heard of. That when you come across their work, you're like, "Holy shit, this is it!"
Yeah.
Or you find that musician before anybody else does, and you're like, "This is going to be somebody."
Yeah.
And it's sad that sometimes you see that music change once they get into the. So I think that there's something. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, have I ever told you my AWOL Nation story?
No.
So I'll make it quick. I guess I don't have to make it quick. We can go as long as I want. You're driving, and it's our show. So
Exactly.
But in college, I think I told you, but like radio was what I was actually studying to get into sports radio stuff. I was like, I had a couple of ESPN internships in college. Like I wanted to do the drive time sports radio thing. Right. But they also had an on-campus radio station that was like, and it was at such a low frequency. It only had like a 3-mile radius. So it actually flew under FCC regulations. So we could play whatever we wanted because it wasn't big enough to have been regulated by the FCC. Right. And so we had this like dungeon basement underneath the cafeteria in the school that was like all decked out with like awesome music posters and vinyl record hangings in there. And I did 3 nights a week from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. I would go in and just play my own music for 2 hours. And like, there was 12 people that listened because I posted on Facebook and said, "Hey, I'm going to go in and play some music. Like, message me if you want to hear something," kind of thing. And one of the guys who ran, he was like the senior at the time. I was a sophomore in college. And he had friends that were in the music industry. And one of them was like he was either a distributor or like some kind of an executive assistant or something like that. He wasn't a producer, but he was involved on the business side of things. And so he lent us a early copy of Sail because we were underneath that FCC. Like, we're only broadcasting to 3 miles. He's like, "No, you're not really breaking any rules here. Nobody's going to hear this relative to being early out, kind of thing." And we played Sail, and this was 2011 when I'm in there, late 2011, and I'm in there playing it at this time, and I'm like, this is going to be huge. Like, this song rips, and this song is going to be giant. And everybody's like, "This is kind of crazy sounding. Like, what is this?" I'm like, this is the first I've heard of these guys. I know that the singer, and I can't remember the band that he was in before, but he was in another band and did some stuff in the early 2000s, late 90s. And I'm like, but he just did this like kind of experimental thing, and it's awesome. And I played that, and it was like the most requested song in my 2-hour block. Like, "Play that one again." I can't remember what it was called. And then like, lo and behold, 6 months later, like, it's the biggest song on the planet for however many months or a couple years that it was giant. It's on every video game. It's on every commercial. And I'm like, that was freaking sweet. Like, that's one of the only things I could point to, but like, I was ahead of the curve literally because we had like special access to it that nobody else did.
Well, you should put that in your IG bio. I brought AWOL. I brought Sail and AWOL Nation to the world.
I found AWOL Nation. That reminds me. There's a.
I'm a little bit jealous of you though, because that is one of the jobs that I wanted as a kid.
Yeah.
Like a disc jockey. Like, really cool ones here. We got a guy named Dead Air Dennis. He plays like classic rock station, and he like got to know the artists, got to go to the shows. He would always have like the Monday breakdown where the guys would go out and party on the weekend after their show and tell about it. And he's like, "The stuff I can't tell, we're going to keep that off the air, but here's the stuff we can talk about," and like, and like, he just became the coolest dude. He actually plays music at the greatest bar in Lexington, Kentucky. It's Chevy Chase Inn. It's the oldest bar in Lexington, Kentucky. I mean, we have air conditioning on their sign. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those places, but it's all these old war horses, like 70, 80-year-old lushes in there just sitting around watching UK basketball, got more money than they know how to spend it.
Yep.
But it's a bunch of old timers. And then like with that kind of place, you get the beatniks and the hipsters and that stuff too. But it's like a cooler grade. It's like the real ones that the hipsters try to look like and the beatniks try to be like.
Yes.
It's those type of people. You can go in there and still to this day get a shot of Pappy Van Winkle, any vintage, for suggested retail price. They don't have an inflated price for the 23. For the 23, you're going to pay $40 for a shot. You know, that's a $250 shot in most places. You know, so even in the place that's 2 buildings down, it's $210 more a shot. But Chevy Chase Inn is like, nope, we're holding it down. But those kind of things, man. Like I'm a very nostalgic person. Like I loved when ESPN2 would do the throwback baseball games, the throwback NBA games. And I think that somewhat goes into that stuff that we talked about too, like the music that you hear when you're 14 and most impressionable is the music you go to your whole life.
Yeah.
I just think that's a design flaw in the human existence, is that we don't stay current. We're anchored to those other things more. And I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it is something that I observe.
Man, I could do this for like 3 more hours, man.
Well, we can do it. We can do it every time if you want. We can go down the rabbit hole of it. We ought to do it. Like we ought to try to like plan out and really find some things that you're in love with in a movie that I match that love with, and we talk about them, dissect them. We can Mystery Science Theater 3000 over here.
There we go.
Deconstruct these movies and songs, but I want to do it just because, you know, I like being excited about things, and I like sharing things that have made me happy or brought me emotion or give me reason to think. So yeah, I think this needs to be something that we consistently do. Maybe not as a full episode, maybe as a full series, but man, if we can share art, if we can share books and movies and music, like, man, those are 4 things that can enrich a person's life, and it is 4 things that can pull you out of a funk. You know, like many times I've found reprieve in any of those things. So I think it's a little bit tangent, kind of off the wall episode. But dude, if somebody's listening, they've got 6 to go watch, go listen to, and I guarantee you, if you pick the right ones, wherever you're at in your day, it's going to feel better. You know.
That is the truth, man. Well, yeah, I'm totally down to do these more often, but we'll call it there for episode 2 of the week, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Man. Thank you guys so much.